Chelsea Physic Garden was established as the Apothecary's Garden in London, England in 1673 by the Worshipful Society of Apothecaries. The Physic Garden, the term physic here referring to the science of healing, was established to grow plants to be used as medicines. This 4-acre Physic Garden is among the oldest botanical gardens in Britain. Its rock garden is the oldest in Europe, devoted to alpine and Mediterranean plants. The largest fruiting olive tree in Britain also lives here. The olive tree, along with many other uncommon plants, are protected by the garden's heat-trapping high brick walls. The world's northmost grapefruit plant is also growing here, outdoors. The garden is a member of the London Museums of Health and Medicine. It is also Grade 1 listed in the Register of Historic Parks and Gardens. The Worshipful Society of Apothecaries initially established the garden on a leased site in Chelsea on the land of Sir John Danvers. Danvers House adjoined the mansion that had once been the house of Sir Thomas More. In 1696, Danvers House was pulled down to make way for Danvers Street. In 1713, Dr. Hans Sloane purchased the adjacent Manor House of Chelsea from Charles Cheney, 1st Viscount of Newhaven, which he leased to the Society of Apothecaries for £5 a year. This was on the basis that the garden supplied the Royal Society with 50 herbarium samples a year. This amounted to up to 2,000 plants. This was the start of a golden age for Chelsea Physic Garden, becoming the most richly stocked garden of botanicals in the world. Its seed exchange program was established following a visit in 1682 from Paul Hermann, a Dutch botanist connected with the Hortus Botanicus Leiden, and continues to this day. The seeds exchange program's most notable act may have been in the introduction of cotton into the colony of Georgia, and more recently, the worldwide spread of the Madagascar periwinkle. Isaac Rand, a member and fellow of the Royal Society, published a condensed catalogue of the garden in 1730, called a name which I'm not going to try and pronounce. The pond rockery is Europe's oldest, dating back to the 17th century. In 2014, a new rock garden was added to the rockery to allow more Mediterranean plants to grow. Here, you'll also spot the bust of famous plant hunter Joseph Banks. He looks over the pond as he did on his ship as he sailed to Iceland in search of new plants. Parts of the rockery are also made up of clam shells from a voyage to Tahiti with Captain Cook, plus pieces of the masonry from the Tower of London. Elizabeth Blackwell's A Curious Herbal, published in the 1730s, was illustrated partly from the specimens taken from the Chelsea Physic Garden. Sadly, during the 1870s, parts of the garden were lost to road development to allow the widening of Royal Hospital Road. When the garden was first established by the Worshipful Society of Apothecaries in 1673, its role was to provide a place where they could grow all of the plants which young apothecaries could learn to identify key medicinal plants. This is the area where apothecaries grew and studied medicinal plants in the 17th and 18th centuries. Of course, today's chemists are no longer trained in the garden, but the Physic Garden is still visited today by medical professionals to learn about the history of plant-based medicines. The dicotyledon order beds were laid out in 1902. In these beds, you'll find over 800 plants laid out according to their families. The flowering plants are divided into two groups, dicotyledons and monocotyledons. In other words, single-leaf germination plants and double-leaf germination plants. This area focuses on the dicots and a selection of 300 plant families. Plants are based in families according to their flower structures. They represent some of the dicots, arranged in a linear sequence of families based on a system established by the botanists Benton and Hooker. Classification is set to change in the future thanks to modern science. Botanists can now classify plants according to their DNA sequence. This means there will be many changes to plant names and families over the coming decades, which the garden will need to keep up with. The Edibles Garden showcases a diverse collection of fruits, vegetables, and herbs. Beds in the center display plants according to their vitamin content, and the surrounding beds demonstrate a range of unusual tender herbs and spices, along with plants used to produce edible oils and alcohol. The Garden of Useful Plants shows over 200 species used both historically and today. It aims to bring people closer to the plants which are unnoticeably woven into our everyday lives. Here, you'll find all the plants we don't even notice we're using today, from common fabrics to color dyes. In the center of this area sits a bee forage, a collection of plants useful for attracting busy bees to pollinate. Back in the 1600s, the site was chosen for its close proximity to the river to make the most of its warm air currents. It also gave them a base to more barges, allowing them to conduct plant-finding expeditions in surrounding areas. The river access allowed plants arriving from around the world to be introduced to the British Isles via the garden. Its international reputation was established quickly as a result of the Global Seed Exchange scheme, which is over 300 years old and still functions today. Today, there are over 5,000 consumable plants. The present-day glasshouses date to the late Victorian period. Completed in 1903 by Foster and Pearson, they house some of the world's rarest tropical and subtropical species, together with ferns, succulents, and carnivorous plants. Their elegant teak and cast iron structures contribute to the garden's unique sense of place and London's built heritage. Despite their age, the quality of the craftsmanship and elegance is undiminished. Now, after a century of constant use, they are increasingly fragile. Although the garden opened 3.5 centuries ago, it only opened up to the public for the first time in 1983. So if you wish to visit the garden, tickets cost around £10 each. They are open every day and during the hours of daylight.